Okay. I'm not sure if everybody can hear me, but okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, members of council, for having us here this evening. We just wanted to provide you an update on the status of work in Takoma Park and address any questions, concerns that you have. I'm here tonight with Mr. Rich Ellison. I know many of you have already known him, had the opportunity to get an email from him, and work with him on the project, as well as one of our engineers, our manager with engineering, Miss Sarah Lacey. Real quick, I just want to go through the presentation, high-level overview for those of you that don't already know. Pepco is working in Takoma Park, installing underground conduit for I should know that by heart now. 3 underground feeders, and we are in the city of Takoma Park. It's part of our commitment to reliability and safety for residents. We hope everybody survived the snowstorm and the windstorm, and a lot of the work that we do to keep our system reliable. Thank you so much for being supportive. Just a real quick map, just a reminder, the work is taking place between 2 substations, the Sligo substation, which is in downtown Silver Spring, going through Takoma Park towards our Takoma substation, which is in Prince George's County. Before we go into the current status and future schedules, I do want to highlight for all of you this evening, as it relates to Eastern Avenue, Pepco internally is going to be working on some enhanced communication efforts, particularly for residents along Eastern Avenue who have been impacted by this project. We're going to be looking at doing some additional meetings in DC Ward 4, as well as more outreach in Takoma Park. And one of the things that we've been able to enjoy with the city of Takoma Park, with your staff, is information about how we can always improve our communications. So we're also going to be looking at what options exist for additional letter communication, pamphlets, brochures, in addition to the meetings, just to enhance communications around some of these more complicated areas like Eastern Avenue for residents. So I look forward to continuing to work with council as well as City of Takoma Park staff on any thoughts or ideas, and as our outreach ramps up, we'll make sure that we keep you advised as to what's being communicated. And with that, I will turn this over to Mr. Rich Ellison for updates and map fun. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you. Now, if everybody can see it, we'll use this map over here since I'm going to be using a pointer. We're going to start over on the Takoma substation side, which is on New Hampshire, and give you a little idea of everything that's already been installed, the status of the whole project through Philadelphia Avenue. Over on New Hampshire, the power plant, the substation sits up here in this corner. We already have the line all the way down to the intersection of Eastern. Now, when we ran that line down there, that line is, we've already gone back in, we've replaced the subgrade. It's one of the reasons that New Hampshire rather is fairly smooth, because we've already gone back and done the work under the surface that we took out. When we got to the Eastern intersection, we also stubbed in the second line, so that when we go back in to do the second line, which will happen a little later this year, we won't have to interrupt that intersection again. Now, from the point of Eastern Avenue headed towards town, Eastern Avenue starts here, comes up through here. We basically have both lines in and complete up to 4th Avenue, just short of Kansas. The primary line that we're trying to put online a little later this summer actually is all the way up to Carroll Street. Now, if you're driving down Eastern, you'll probably see a steel plate down there in the middle of the road as you're coming down the hill. That steel plate is where the second line was stopped. So there's about 2,000 feet of pipe that still has to go in to get us up to the manhole. We were basically doing that because we were trying to coordinate with what we thought was going to be an oncoming project from DDOT. Turns out that project is not moving forward at this time. Now, as we get farther down Eastern, Probably our favorite location that everybody loves us the least is right down here at Walnut. Now, right now, we already have the primary line in all the way up here, and we're actually working next to the church, Seventh-day Adventist Church here on the corner. Starting within the next couple of days, we've already contracted it, we're trying to get it scheduled. Fort Myers is going to start at Walnut and start replacing the sub-base and work all the way back to New Hampshire. That should take somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks for them to get back to New Hampshire. As they do, that will also alleviate all that rough road coming up the hill on Eastern, because they're going to go back under the asphalt, take out what we put in, put concrete back in its place, and then put a patch over top of that. So it'll be very smooth and solid, so it's ready for a final paving when the project is completed. We're going to start at Walnut, which is down here on the bottom. Oops, bing, bing. Where are we at? There we are. Yeah. We're starting right down here, which is Walnut, and that will go all the way back to Eastern and New Hampshire. Now, what that won't solve in that area is the areas that we didn't work on. The biggest problem on Eastern Avenue is the side of the road that we haven't worked on yet. Part of the reason that there's so many potholes out there is the asphalt's coming up because there's a lot of water underground in that area. If you'll notice, when people are driving up the hill, they're actually driving over on the areas that we have disturbed and have the temporary patch in because there's so many potholes down through there. How the district is going to react to that, I do not know.
I'm sorry, could you just back up a second and remind us what the steps are?
Questions, we have to use the mic.
Okay.
Yeah, could you, is it on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you just step back for a moment and remind us there's several steps in the project? Am I correct about this? There's the first pipe, the second pipe, there's the final paving, and in between there's working on the other side of Eastern. Could you just
Okay, yeah, well, let me give you
review that again
let
for
me give
me?
you a
Thank
quick
you.
overview.
Maybe I'm the only
The
one
project
that
is
doesn't
designed
know this.
to run 2 feeds. Now, the reason they're doing this is once this goes in, there's not going to be a reason for Pepco to ever open the street again to make repairs to the lines or to upgrade the lines. These are totally serviceable units. This is a system. It's actually made up, one of those lines is made up of 14 pipes. 8 of those conduits carry power. 2 of those conduits carry a digital temperature registering system to where Pepco can actually sit at the computer at the substation and actually tell you if they have a hot spot or a bad spot in the lines. Then they also have conduits in there for fiber optics, which go from station to station to communicate with. Each of those lines separate is 14 lines. Now, the 69,000 volts we were talking about, there are going to be 3 power feeds. There'll be 2 in one of these lines, 1 in the other. And they run from manhole to manhole. Right now, by July or August, we're trying to get the first line completed all the way from the Takoma substation on New Hampshire to the Sligo substation, which is actually over behind Colesville Road. Now, after we complete the first one, they'll start running wire. Now, as we put these conduits in, these conduits are empty conduits. We do not take out any water. There's no live wires going in at this time. We don't interrupt the services to any of the buildings. This is strictly an excavation process of putting it in the street and closing the street back up. Then, as soon as we complete the first line, while they're putting the wire in, we're going to start back on the remainder of the second line. A little better detail on how we work. When we go out there, the first thing we do, we have engineering come out and locate exactly where the line goes. Then we come along and we saw cut. Now, the reason we saw cut is that when we're working, it makes sure that there will be no vibration from our machinery transferring to any of the buildings adjoining the route. It also makes it much easier to dig and get down to depth because this conduit's anywhere from 12 feet deep to 20 feet deep, depending on the location. Now, because we're putting 14 lines in each of these trenches, we move a little slow. Normally when you're putting in pipe like the water people do, they go in a week they'll put in 500, 600, 800 feet of pipe. With us, it's more like 75 to 80 feet a week. That's if everything works good and we don't run into rock and water and the unknown lines. After that's in, that conduit is covered in red concrete. So if anyone ever digs down again, there's a warning sign so they won't break the electrical service. Then that is backfilled. We temporarily patch it with tar, which is what you see out on Eastern now. Then we come back, we take the tar out, we pour the concrete subbase that we cut out. They put tar over that again temporarily, and then when the whole job's done, we'll come back through and totally pave curb to curb. So there are steps that this goes through.
So again, I'm sorry if I'm the only one that doesn't get this, but so when you say you're going down Eastern and you've got these steps on one side of the street,
right?
And then you said something about the other side of the street a couple of minutes ago. Are you going through the same set of steps on the other side of the street, or did you just mean when you pave?
Well, what we did was we went through every place that we could get both lines in at the same time we did. There are times where these lines come together and it's all 28 pipes in one trench. But they need to stay separated as often as possible because they generate a lot of heat. As we've put them through, there are manholes about every 2,000 or 3,000 feet for them to pull the wire through, because we'll be completely paved and in. They'll put the wire down through the manhole. The only thing you'll notice out there when they start putting the wire in is some trucks with some enormous rolls of wire on them. The second line in most places is paralleled. Sometimes it's farther over in the street. Like going down Eastern, it's going to be closer to the center of the street, not all the way over to the curb. But the second line goes about where the center line of the road is. And of course, the first one has a tendency to pull closer to the curb on the other side. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you one more time on this. I just wanted to find out a little more about the replacing of the subbase.
Yes.
So that should resolve the road issues on that side of the street, is what you're saying?
Yes.
And what is the timing for that?
The crew has already been contracted. They were hoping they would get there this week starting. I haven't seen them there yet. We were looking for them Monday to be on the road. Apparently there was a little glitch on their end. So within the next few days, you should see them out on the road started. The way the permitting came out of the district, it started at Walnut going back towards New Hampshire. We really had hoped it'd go the other way because the roughest spots down where Eastern comes down to New Hampshire down the hill. But the sequence they're giving us the permits on is we're starting at Walnut working backwards.
I'm glad to see you doing that, because as you know, the road is in terrible condition, so
the
that will help a lot.
road is in horrible conditions, and unfortunately, all we're going to do is fix half of it. Mm-hmm. We're going to fix the people driving into town are going to have a smoother road. On the other side, someone's going to have to relay to the district about the potholes out there because they're a mess. But with the hot and cold that we've had this year with such fast changing temperatures, that's probably true all over the district.
And when you replace that, what will happen with those metal plates that are currently in the street?
Okay, no place that they're doing this has metal plates now. When they come in, they'll cut out what you see for the asphalt there now. They'll pour 10 inches of concrete, then overnight they'll put a steel plate over that. Next day they'll come back in, they'll asphalt over the top of it, and the plates are gone.
What about, I don't know if I'm understanding this correctly, but there's like a small steel plate currently somewhere, I'm not exactly sure where along there, but I think that's where you were saying you'll come back to feed in some of the line.
You're talking on Eastern right there where 4th Street comes out.
Yes.
That is where we discontinued working on the second line, trying to get everything in and out in front of that district project.
And so will that remain, or is that when you put in the sub base?
Once we go into that steel plate, then we're going to have a crew running all the way up to the top of the hill near Whittier.
Okay.
And then, of course, as that goes, then about every 100, 150 feet, then the steel plates disappear again because we temporarily patch them going in.
Okay, and then my other question is, when you come back, what is the timeline for you coming back to the other side of the street? And when that's done, will you do the sub base on that as well?
Right. We're trying to get the first line activated. We think that's going to happen probably around August of this year. Then at the same time as we're coming off of different work sites, because we have 10 to 11 crews out there every day in different locations. As we come off of sites, we're going to be dropping crews back and working this other line. So we're going to be segmenting into it over the next 3 or 4 months of coming back and working the other areas.
And then will you be able to come back on that side as well and improve the road instead of doing the temporary patches?
Well, of course, as we go in and like right now, as we start coming up across Kansas and we start coming up the hill, our process is going to be taking out the asphalt that's all tore up now. But by the time we get to it, it's going to be summer.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, let's see. Where are we at? And there. Okay. So we talked about the fact that we have crews right here working. Within the next couple of weeks, we're going to be down on Carroll Street and out of this area completely. On Carroll Street, right now, there is a crew down here by the new condo building that's down there that has the parking garage underneath. We're right in that area right now, right across from the Jewish funeral home. We're only working on one side of the street, but as we're working, we wind up taking parking up all the way down to Maple. On this end, as this crew comes around the other direction from by the church, they're going to be heading back to the same point at a meeting point. So we should be on Carroll for the next 3.5 months, putting pipe in that area. Then it will be shortly thereafter, there'll be probably a couple of months break in the downtown. Then we'll come right back and start the same process again. As we go around the corner over here, this is actually Cedar right here, next to the Metro. Right now we have crews right over here, right almost to the point where we move into the day lot for the Metro parking. That crew over there is moving a little slow because they found about a 10-foot thick piece of granite. So we're having to cut granite out of the bottom of the hole. They're figuring within about 2 weeks, then that crew is going to be switching sides. Now, as we switch sides, we've already done most of the work that's actually out here in Cedar. As we switch sides, we're going to shut down the traffic between the Metro parking lot and up to Piney Branch. As we do that, we're going to direct people around to Blair, bringing them back onto Carroll, and with signs bringing them back onto Cedar and bringing them around the other way. So the Metro lot will stay open the whole time. And I know just about every time we're up there working, that seems to be one of the people's big concerns, is that lot's hard to get into. As we do that, Tulip will be shut down to local traffic only, which is right up in here. We figured that this crew will hit Piney Branch in approximately 3 months. At the same time, if we go up here to Piney Branch, at Piney Branch, we have a crew right here on the Eastern Avenue side, still in the district side of the street. They've put new manholes in, and they're actually working towards Piney Branch. Now, that crew's about a month from getting to Piney Branch. When we get to Piney Branch, we'll open dig the first 2 lanes, which are the lanes coming toward the Metro. We'll dig those 1 lane at a time so we keep 2-way traffic open. Once we get to the median, we'll go underground. We'll actually tunnel under the side leaving town. So that way the traffic will still be flowing. There'll be 2-way traffic in there the whole time during the construction. We're also going to return, probably within the next week, we're going to be changing the configuration up here. Takoma Avenue is going to be shut down right here at Buffalo, And it's going to be shut down from there to where Albany hits right up here by the college. As we shut that down, the buses have already been rerouted to go up Piney Branch to Philadelphia and come into town that way. We'll be detouring cars up Buffalo to the four-way stop so they can turn left onto Albany. But say again? No, we're going to do it on Buffalo this time. We're going to do it on Buffalo because if we can keep the buses out of the area, cars can handle Buffalo real well. That'll also give the neighbors a break down there on the lower end of Takoma because they have yard working contractors and others coming in and they'd like us to leave them alone for a while. Now, the work that I'm talking about up here, this is going up from this location towards the Fenton-Albany connection. We have everything but 400 feet of both lines installed in this area. So we're just going to drop the crew back in and do the last 400 feet. As we go around the corner in front of the college, we presently have a crew right here. That crew has about 100 foot of pipe to connect both ends of the unit together. And then we're going to leave the college area down here by the college, go up to New York Avenue, and start heading towards Philadelphia. All that should be happening in the next 2 weeks also. Now, to let everybody know, if anybody's familiar with that area, there's a parking garage up there. So the college has been very good to work with us. They're going to have their security work as far as getting cars in and out, letting them only turn one way as they come out of the garage, so we can keep the garage functioning while we're doing the partial street shutdowns in that area. The other thing that's going on up in that area right now, I think I have that next one, yep, it's the other one, is past the college all the way up here to Philadelphia. At Philadelphia right now, there is a crew that's actually set up on one side of Philadelphia. That crew is actually tunneling underneath Philadelphia Avenue. So they're going under the intersection without shutting down traffic at all. They're approximately 50 feet in. They've got 217 feet to go, so we figure that's going to take about another 2 to 3 months to get them across Philadelphia. Now, we already have the pipe fairly close to them between King Street and Islington. So we already have part of the line in there. We also have crews that are working everywhere from Philadelphia all the way over towards Colesville Road. We have everything complete to Wayne Avenue. But there are 3 crews currently right now that are on that other end finishing up the other end to bring us all to have the line completed come the 1st of August. If we can just get the weatherman to cooperate a little bit, keep the snow, the rain away, and stop finding rock. As always, when we try to tell you the schedule, we try to give you our best educated guesses. Those things do slide sometimes. But we try every way in the world to keep them on path because there's a lot of other people that have to follow us to make this thing work in the end. As we start back into the second half, or the second line, the good thing about that is we won't have to interrupt some of the areas. Like, we'll be completely done up to Wayne Avenue, so everything downtown Silver Spring will be left alone. We'll be across Philadelphia, so we won't have to go under Philadelphia. Once we go under once, all 28 lines are going in at the same time. So we have about a third of the second line already in. We already have all of the manholes with the exception of 2 in. So we're getting down to the point now where we're working more of the things that are less disruptive. Anybody have particular questions that I can answer for you?
Thank you. Is this work? Yeah. Thank you, Rich. And so I have a ton of questions and comments. I want to say first off that the crews are helpful in individual cases when someone's blocked in by in their driveway and they have to get out within a short period of time. The crews have generally been quite willing to address that, and I think people appreciate that. I think in a lot of other ways, it really isn't working out the way we had hoped, and that's partly a communication challenge, and it's also partly the nature of projects like this. And so I think anyone who's ever done even a small project in their home knows that once you get started, things that you don't anticipate, like large chunks of granite come up or other kinds of things. I think there was a turning area up on Takoma Avenue that you wouldn't have really had any way of anticipating, and you had to take extra time to get around that. So those kinds of things happen, but I think to me the biggest problem is, and has been and still continues to be, that when there's a change in location or timing, we're just not hearing about it. And we're not hearing about it in a timely way. And as a result, the quality of life is very negatively affected. And I'm just going to say to you and to Tammy and the other people, I've talked to our state legislators about this, and I think something has to be done to address it if that's the way it's going to continue. And I'll give you two examples, and you can respond, or one example anyway. You mentioned you have to go back for a stretch of 400 feet, I think it was, for up on Takoma Avenue, and that's the reason why there's going to be a second detour, evidently now down Albany instead of Baltimore. And that had been scheduled to be completed, and it wasn't. And I told everybody that that was what the schedule was going to be, and then you all knew in early October that you weren't going to be able to do that, and you told us in January. And it's just impossible to operate that way when it's something this disruptive. And so I would like you to explain what happened and why, because it seems as if now there's no choice but to have everybody go back through everything when they were told before that they wouldn't have to.
Well, I've been doing this since 1964. And one of the favorite jokes in our business is we lay out great plans at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and by the time we get back to the office at 7 o'clock in the morning, we throw them in the trash can. Our business is a very fluid, real-time business, and it's a reactionary business. Because we're running conduit that is it's very important, the way this is engineered, is it has to stay on the path that the engineers have designed. If we run into a rock, we can't divert 15 feet over. Because when you're pulling the types of lines, what they're going to pull through these conduits, these are 6-inch in diameter conduits, they're going to pull a 4-inch, what is basically a coax cable through them. They look exactly like a coax cable. It's a fairly stiff wire. So when you start pulling them 2,000 and 3,000 feet, we can't change direction even a few degrees. So we're basically left with a problem where we have to keep going no matter what we find. Now, sometimes our operations, no, they don't go smooth. Our operations, we meet 2-3 times a week discussing what's happening, sometimes that day, sometimes the next day. The particular area you're talking about, we had a water main break up there. We had safety concerns of a subcontractor. We removed a subcontractor, which caused some delays in the area. There were also lawyers involved, and that caused some more delays in the area. So instead of us being able to just go ahead and put a crew on one of our crews on the job, it had to delay to all the lawyers to stop complaining and talking and threatening. Then it was a matter of how do we get back in, because we've put the crews out everywhere else. When do we get back in? And the plan was made specifically that up next to the college we had 2 crews working towards each other. So as soon as we got to a point where we were too close for 2 crews to work together, we dropped that crew back and let that crew bring that last 400 feet up. Now in the process of that, there's some inconvenience to the neighbors. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. When we set the plans down originally, when Pepco presented this to the city manager, the game plan was to go from point to point. It wasn't to interrupt and then have to restart. Unfortunately, the circumstances happened on the job that caused that.
That's just not an adequate explanation, because I don't care about arguing with lawyers. You could have found a way to do it, or you could have told us what was happening. At a minimum, we should have been able to tell the people, you know what, there's a chance that what we told you was wrong and you're going to find out later. Or we could have, DC got to decide what direction they were going to go in. Maybe we could have said, hey, pull off someone on that other area where it's just the college and the railroad tracks and it's not people living in residences. And, you know, I don't care about the lawyers. We should have been told at the time you knew that wasn't being continued.
Well, to help everybody understand one thing, and we were just talking about the processes that go on, there isn't any way for us to shut down one area, go through, do 100% of this work, and be gone. It is a total impossibility.
It's not about that. It's about informing us, which you didn't do. And I know our...
Well, we still had to come back, Peter. We still had to come back and do the subsurface. The contractor that we removed from the job did some damage to the curbs. I've got a contractor come in. It's got several hundred feet of curb that has to be replaced and guttered that the guy damaged that I didn't think was proper. Judgment call on our part, but you go up there next to the park, I'm not happy with what they left behind. So we're going to take it out and replace it.
I don't think you're responding to what I'm talking about.
No, I think you have to understand that we're not insensitive to the fact that you think we could get finished just from the original plan.
I think you can tell us what's happening. I started out by saying you can tell us what's happening. And it doesn't matter if a lawyer's yelling or there's a little joke or you've been doing it since 1964. The way this started out, and I went back and looked at the first presentation, and I said I doubted that the coordination would work with WSSC, and it really hasn't very well because it's blocked up the whole area when people want to leave, and when there's some extra thing like the broken water main, nothing stops, everything just keeps going, and then literally you can't drive over there. But my point is not, was there a bad contractor? Did something get discovered? Does the work have to be redone? You have to tell us what's going on.
Right, and we told you as soon as we were, as soon as we could make a decision of going back into the area, that's when we first started talking.
It was 4 months later. You could have definitely told us.
Right, but during the 4 months, I didn't have answers for you, sir. I'm sorry.
We didn't need answers. We needed to know there was a delay. Well, no, say thank you. This is a. Tammy. Can you hang on a minute, Cindy? Tammy, you don't get to turn off the thing. I want to make the point. I will pass it over to Cindy, but that's not an adequate response in my opinion.
Oh. I'm sorry, Peter. We have tried very hard to go out of our way on this job to try to coordinate everything in advance. Are we perfect at it? We're not. I personally have filmed every single foot of this project, the 3.5 miles end to end. I have gone to every business that I can go to, every house owner that we've possibly had any kind of contact with. We go in and we try to explain them. We examine their foundations. We try to teach them about sound vibrations. We try to answer any of their concerns or questions. We're not perfect. Peter, I'll be the first to tell you, I wish we had some answers in the 4 months. We were focusing on getting a job done, and perhaps we let you down on that one, and I apologize for that.
So put another way, Takoma residents, I'm from the other side of town, so I'm thinking about Eastern.
Right.
Put another way, what are the ways that we can improve communications with residents and with the city council? Because I think we all feel that it could get better. Of course, there's changes that are going to come up. How do we find out about them? How do we get them communicated to our residents as quickly as we can manage? Somebody else was waving their hand.
Anybody? I'm sorry. Okay. I'll speak to real briefly. The one thing I do want to point out, the implication that the council member and that Rich is speaking to, there was also a legal issue that was involved, and we as a company have to be sensitive when those issues arrive because we certainly don't want any additional liability. What we can do better, we are aware that notifying council members is what's going to be critical because you as council members are often the first line of defense in notifying your constituents. And as part of our enhanced communication strategy moving forward for Takoma Park, I can commit to what council members will certainly see as more updates from Pepco as it relates to the work. We currently send to staff the 3-week look-aheads, but we are going to look for opportunities to take information from the 3-week look-aheads specific to work in Takoma Park, because we also provide it for Montgomery County as well. That'll give you a better sense of what's going on 3 weeks in advance. What we would encourage any council member is questions from your constituents, concerns from the community. They need to get to us as fast as possible so we can pull in our contractor and we can pull in the experts to address those issues. Rich is correct. Communication is not always going to be as fluid as we would like it to be. We want our contractors in the field to work safely. We want our contractors in the field to be responsive to the people that are living and working in these communities. And we're always going to err on the side of what's safe and what's going to work on the ground. But when we get it wrong, we have to apologize. And what we need to correct, we will correct. And what I can commit to moving forward is more outreach to the council members. And what we're asking is communicate that to your constituents, and where we need to be meeting with constituents or on site with constituents, that's what we want to do.
I just wanted to also add that since the beginning of this process, we have a page on the city's project directory specifically for this project. It links to Pepco's website where there's a lot of information about the project, but we also post the 3-week look ahead so people can access that information. And also the city Public Works Department, our construction manager, is keenly aware of the schedule. People can contact Ian Chamberlain, or they can contact me, the Public Works Director, anytime you have questions. And if council members are getting questions, they can funnel that to us as well. And, you know, I will say, without exception, Rich and Tammy are very quick at responding. They do respond in the evenings, weekends, and so we'll do the best we can to get information out. But the other thing, I think post this meeting, we'll try to enhance our webpage with the various areas, because each one is kind of on a separate time frame. The eastern from Walnut to New Hampshire has got its piece. By the Metro's got its piece. It's kind of Cedar to Piney Branch. And then Takoma and Fenton has its piece. So Rich and Tammy and I will get together and try to kind of summarize what he's laid out here today. I think the most important piece of information is that over the next 2 to 3 months, there's going to be a lot of work going on, either on excavation of the first trench or pavement restoration, and then they'll come back and start working on the second trench in areas where they haven't been before, and that will probably shock people, because it always does. So there's going to be a whole nother round, I don't know, Rich, 3 to 4 months, if not more, of work on the second trench, followed by pavement restoration. So this whole process that we've seen so far is going to repeat itself this summer. So right now we're talking March, April, May for the work that he's just discussed, and then June, July, August, there's going to be the next round of work, if not more. So we'll try to put that in a chart that people can easily absorb.
We also, before you leave today, I've got some of my cards over on the table. Please feel free to take them. My cell number's on there. It's on 24 hours a day. If a question comes up, if you don't have information, pick up the phone and call. I'm always there for you. Because the biggest thing that keeps, and we were talking about this earlier before the meeting started, the whole program is planned on one thing, and that is try to keep down complaints and keep the public informed. Now, in the process of doing that, our big thing, we look at a complaint from a very simple thing. A complaint's a very expensive thing for us to handle. So if we can get the information out there, 99% of the complaints we have on this project, and there's been very, very few, is people want to know what's happening. They see someone out there tearing up the street in front of their business or their home. There is no one in here that will tell you it is not inconvenient. It would be if it was my house. And I know a lot of these people will give me, their feelings, and I feel for them, because if it was in front of my house, I would be no happier. But for us to have some of the nice things that we have in our world, infrastructure needs to happen. And infrastructure is always going to cause problems in Takoma Park because of traffic. So there's always going to be traffic, there's always going to be noise, but most of the time it's a matter of us just getting the information out. That's the reason I go and actually go into every business and talk to the owners. We can't get into every house because we don't know when people are there. But all of my foremen carry my card. If a customer comes out of their house and has a question, the foreman hands them my card. I'll go visit with them, so they can understand why their windows are rattling. They're rattling because the sound's moving through the air. We go down and we film their basements and send them a record of their basement walls so they don't have to be concerned that there's going to be damage to their walls from the noise we're making. So we do a lot of things right. We don't do everything right, but we try very hard. And the big thing is, when I mentioned the thing about complaints, we were kind of laughing about this earlier. When a complaint comes into the 800 number, because it's posted out there, we have an 800 number on our signs. There's an 800 number also on the Pepco signs. By the time that call goes in, is registered, is handled by 20 different people, and then it's sent to me, then I've got 10 more people involved in it. It's a very expensive proposition to get information back to people. So we want to get to people as fast as we can, with as much information as we can.
Rich?
What do you mean by 4 months, sir?
I think earlier you said it took like 4 months for you to resolve the legal issue and the delay.
In that one, we couldn't really pass any information out because
you could have passed the information that there was a problem, there's going to be a change in plans, so at least the community knows that there's something to be changing, and just be part of the process. And I think that's
I agree with you, sir. Here's my problem. When the contractor was defaulted, the contractor has the ability to return to the site. If he can resolve the default, he's allowed to return to the site. So I can't go back and put my crews on doing his work until we resolve what the lawyers are arguing about. You know, this is.
But you can tell the community, hey, we've got a holdup here that's maybe gonna change our plans here for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Just a heads up, you know.
We do not disagree, Peter. We don't disagree. We acknowledge that in this instance, at a minimum, we could have communicated that there would be delays. But there's one optically I just want to point out, because I think this is getting lost. Crews were still working in the area. As Rich said, that contract crew, they show up, they have time to cure, and as all this is going on, people are still working, work is still getting done, but in the background, we have the extenuating legal issue. So in this instance, you were not wrong. There was certainly something we could have communicated. This particular instance, and I probably shouldn't even be discussing it in an open forum, but in this particular instance, the circumstances were a bit more complicated.
So I have a couple of very specific things. So on the 3-week look ahead, I've asked about this a couple times, and it's improved a bit, but they don't show the street addresses in every case. So the average person who looks at that honestly can't tell where the work's being done. You know where it is, just put street addresses all the way through. So that's one. Second one, the flaggers sometimes are not there and the streets are already closed off, and we just can't have that. And you mentioned safety's number one. I've seen it multiple times on that area. The road's already closed off. People have to start making the turns, and the flaggers aren't there, or they're setting up. There just has to be a standard rule that no, you can't do that until the flaggers are there.
No, absolutely. We'll stay on top of that. We're constantly on top of the flaggers, because the flaggers will come out, they'll set a few cones up to block a street off, then they'll run down the block to set a sign up. For someone who comes up and has nothing but cones in front of them, that's a problem.
Well, and the pastor mentioned to me that at the intersection with Laurel and Eastern, that the people who come up on the other part of Laurel, they weren't being flagged or deflagged or anything like that. So they're just kind of blundering in their car into that intersection.
Yeah, part of our problem there on
that
one, that flagging operation wasn't set up for a church to have 600 to 900 people show up for a service. It was an oversight when we were.
But even with the
county.
Cars coming in,
yeah.
we need to.
Well,
have
they're not really set up to handle that kind of traffic. Period.
Right. So a couple other things: the buses still continued on and off to go down the detoured things that were too small, and when that happens on Buffalo, we're going to have to try to find a way to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So something about that. I thought you just mentioned Tulip.
Right.
And we all said at the beginning, the first day we were here in January of 2018, everybody agreed that Tulip would not be a good route to have.
Tulip is only
down.
going to be shut down to local traffic. In other words, it's going to be blocked on the eastern end. There's going to be a sign on the opposite end of the block saying closed to all but local traffic, and a sign with a detour pointing on the metro lot to come up Cedar. So
It's
the people
I
who
don't
cut
think
through
it's. I think that's going to be a big problem at TULIP. We need to think a little bit more about that.
Well, we've got the signs ordered. We're going to put them in place here in the next couple of weeks. And Peter, as we've told you before, some of this is trial and error.
Right.
Some of it is we have to put them up. I've sat down with Darryl and gone over this thing, and we think we have a plan that looks like it'll work.
So 2 last things. Road surfaces, I know they're going to get replaced eventually, and so when they don't, they're rougher. The road surfaces on parts of Takoma and Fenton, it's just very difficult to see how they're going to last much longer. I mean, it's not a safe thing to drive on at night. So is there something that can be done before the whole thing is over to address that?
Right now,
it's not safe to drive on it.
Right. The crews started up there. We stopped them because they were causing a problem. Fort Myer was scheduled to come in 2 weeks before 2 weeks after they showed up. That's the reason we pulled them off the street. They're trying to put together a plan now to see how fast we can get through Takoma. One of the advantages is getting that last 400 feet in. Then when we come off the street will be smooth. That gives us time to get the last 400 feet in, get the new curbing in, and get it patched from one end to the other. But that's in the process of planning right now.
Well, is there any way to do anything about the smoothness before that? Because it's really very, very, in my opinion, not safe, especially at night for people to drive along there the way it is now.
There's a couple of places in there that are very rough. I'll take a look and see if there's anything we can do beforehand.
And last thing, I promise, last question. I thought of it when I spoke to the pastor yesterday, and I know that you're accommodating their Saturday worship, which obviously we appreciate. But do we have to have Saturday work of any kind?
Well, the month of February was 28 days long. That means there were 19 working days in that month. 5 of them we could not work because of rain and snow. In other words, we can be finishing this 2 years from now and not work on Saturday, or we can use Saturday to try to catch up some of the time that the weather's
Right,
causing.
but you certainly plan into your schedule that there'll be bad weather days, right?
Well, we plan on what is normally done. We normally plan on working 10 feet a day. We should be able to put a complete 10-foot section in each day. We went out on Colesville, we were putting in 5 feet a week because nobody had any idea that all that was granite underneath. They dug 256 test holes. The engineering crews, Pepco hired them, they came in, they drilled these holes down 18, 20 foot deep. 256 of these holes, they did not find one rock. That's unfortunately what our business is about. We don't know what's there until we open
I'll just
it.
say my guess is for the average resident, maybe they can disagree with me, an extra week or two on the end and having the weekends free would be better.
I would love to not work the weekends. We really don't like working Saturdays. We've tried to avoid it every place we can. Unfortunately, we've gone over this with the permitting process and everything. It costs us more money to work on Saturday. The permits are higher to work on Saturday. It's really just a matter of trying to meet deadlines because there are other people involved in this. Pepco's already committed millions and millions of dollars to having this wire made. There's a contractor already set on schedule to come in and run this wiring. So there's other things that follow after us. The other thing is the longer we extend our schedule out, the more we're going to run into WSSC and Washington Gas with the projects that they have that are capital projects that are already on the board.
Well, I don't think people will be sympathetic to think that you got to rush so that another utility can start working in their neighborhood. So please try to avoid Saturday. Thank you.
Am I the only regular person in here? Like everybody else is like a councilman. Oh, you're right. Okay. I was wondering why everybody's being so deferential to me. So I do want to acknowledge, because a lot has been said, someone else mentioned about responding on weekends and things like that. That is true. We had a situation this past weekend, and we got a response on the weekend. We sent out an email on a Saturday afternoon. We got a response on Sunday morning. We do appreciate that. Rich came out and met with some of our people as well to talk about the oversight and all of that. And so We feel very happy about that. So I guess what I'm really saying is when regular people like us are involved just with information, it makes us feel really important and great. So I know that goes a long way. You know, I don't know how the things you're talking about I think are good. And if you do them, if you execute them well, regular people are going to feel great because they feel like these big people just told me something about this project. You know what I'm saying? It goes a long way. So thank you for that. Anyway.
Appreciate that. Well, we try to drive the sites. The different managers are driving the sites every day. We're looking for people out putting their trash cans out. We will stop and talk to them, get my card into their hands so that they have someone they can ask questions of. Now, we've met a lot of the neighbors. We've made a lot of friends. And honestly, the public at large has been wonderful. They have really worked with us on this job. We've had very few problems, and most of those problems were problems that were unforeseeable. If we can get out ahead of anything, it's one of the reasons we come to these meetings, because yes, it gives people a chance to be heard of what their opinion of what they see, which is good feedback for us, because we want to always make this process an improvement. But the second thing is these meetings give us a chance to reach out and get my card into different people's hands and to try to give you the answers when people ask you. Because the whole thing is communication. We all know that. If the more information I can impart to you that you can pass on, the better. And anything that I can do as far as meeting with any of your constituents, I'm more than happy to. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for coming here this evening. I actually want to pick up on a point that you were just speaking to in terms of coordination with the other utilities. I think part of the frustration may be that we're just in infrastructure improvement fatigue. We've been hit from so many different angles. I mean, from water mains to Pepco, to Purple Line, like if it's the gas, yeah, all of it. We've had all of them. So how do you all work with the other utilities? Can you speak a little bit about how you're coordinating with them? Are there ways in which there can be a little bit more assurances that there is some coordination that's happening so communities are not being hit by so many different utilities? I get it, sometimes it's unavoidable, but there have been instances where we've gotten hit by so many utilities at the same time, we couldn't even figure out who to call to complain to. So if you could speak to that, that would be really helpful.
Well, there's a large effort that goes on at the engineering level, at the government affairs office, even ourselves, where we're in meetings with Washington Gas, the district engineers, the district engineer from WSSC. But what typically happens is the projects that they're involving us in are the same projects we're involving them in. We're involving them in the big ones. And what happens is there's small repair stuff that's constantly happening. I had it happen Friday morning. We're down on Fenton Street. Another crew is replacing a water line on a side street. Their flagmen are dumping traffic right into the fronts of buses because they didn't have their system set up properly. So we have to go in and almost threaten to pull them out of the machine and beat them up to try to get them to put a flagman out there to stop this. But we constantly, during the daytime, we drive these routes several times. On any given day, there'll be 10 to 15 repair projects going on that never get communicated down because they're dealt with on a daily basis. So there's always a lot of little ones going on. There are days when we go out here and we drive around the block 4 or 5 times trying to figure out how to get someplace. Because you drive down, all of a sudden, Washington Gas has got this shut down. We turn off, we go up here, WSSC's got this shut down. So we understand the problem. The problem is that most of the infrastructure here is old, and everybody trying to get it done at the same time, that's a problem. We can't control them. We coordinate every time we can. Like out on Colesville Road, they actually stopped at Spring Avenue, putting in a new water line. Went down to Georgia Avenue and continued it till we could get out of the street because of the rock. Now they're coming back and doing theirs. We have a Washington Gas crew that over near the college, when they built the college, they put the gas line in too shallow. So we've met with their crews, and they're going to swing in there in July between different phases we're doing, and they're going to run a whole new gas main up the street. So this is constantly going on between contractors, at the engineering level, at the government affairs level. It still doesn't take away that there's an enormous amount of infrastructure going on.
I mean, I understand the point that was raised earlier about this being a reactionary industry. A problem happens and you just got to get crews out there and you have to fix it. However, I think if there are some efforts that could be made perhaps at a higher level to ensure that there are systems in place to better coordinate not only the major projects, but the numerous small projects, such that there is an ability to identify perhaps the overlap in an expedited manner. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be unavoidable that you're going to have multiple utilities working in a relatively small area unexpectedly, but at least you would be aware of them without having to drive around or have your crews kind of just happen to run up against folks, because what you've just described is the experience that a number of residents in the community experience as well. And again, I can't stress enough, you're just one of many, but I do believe that there needs to be perhaps even at a state level, like some efforts to be made to ensure that there is a higher level of coordination and more information that's available to all of the utilities, so you all have a better understanding of all of the various projects that are happening.
I just want to say, and Tammy may want to speak to this, but WSSC convenes a quarterly meeting of all utilities and DOTs in the region, so they're maintaining a database of projects. So there is a regional effort that we get invited to participate as well. So we send them our 5-year street resurfacing plan and any kind of stormwater projects. And WSSC has their maps and their various projects. Now, Pepco's usually overhead, but there are certainly underground installations as well. So I don't know how integrated you guys are with the WSSC process, but certainly Washington Gas, WSSC, and the county and jurisdictional paving and stormwater operations do try to share that information. Inevitably, a plan is only as good as a plan. You know, as we've seen on the Eastern Avenue project for DDOT, the start date keeps changing, and then that has a cascade of other effects. And a utility that was going to wait because something else was happening, then there's a delay in that project, so they might hop ahead or they might not, or the time frame just gets stretched for years. I mean, Ward 6, how many years before WSSC came in after intending to do water main work? So some of it seems uncontrollable. There are other factors that we're not aware of, but I agree. And I can definitely say there's much more improvement and trying to create a database where that information gets stored and can be referred to.
I just wanted to give our engineer Sarah an opportunity to just comment on our process.
Absolutely. So from the engineering perspective, especially you hit the nail on the head with the major projects is when we're up in front talking to the other utilities, letting them know this is coming. But I think your point is absolutely perfect. The problem with scheduling and the changes in scheduling across many major projects as well as the small reactionary projects is incredibly difficult. That's what we keep running into. And a lot of the facilitations we see are usually through the DOT, just because they're the ones receiving the permit applications from the various utilities. So we might not know that there's some emergent work coming up from a smaller project, but there's room for improvement there to make sure that everyone's coming to the table and understanding what's popping up that we weren't anticipating or when there's significant changes in the schedule.
Rich, can you just go back? You said earlier about the Eastern Avenue. I wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. That DC DOT has that project been I can't remember exactly how you characterized the.
The project was supposed to come off the boards in December,
Right.
was the last word we had heard. Then the last time I talked to Daryl had heard it had been kicked to 2021.
Right.
So I don't know if it went back into engineering. I haven't talked to the engineering crew because the engineer that is in charge of the DDOT, I don't have a normal interface with. But we know about it because of meeting with the DDOT engineer who's in charge of extending the bike path. But it's just some of this information. It kind of comes from different places. It's like sometimes when we talk about some of the coordination, sometimes the coordination is an employee at Pepco is friends with a guy who now works for WSSC, and they talk. I'll get a call from a contractor that says, well, you're working on Wayne Avenue, but I need to put a statue in front of the church a block up the street, and I need to shut some street down. How can we coordinate together? So there's always some coordination process going on. It's never going to be as good as it should be. But there are an awful lot of people talking and trying to make this better. Contractors usually do because we feel just like the residents do. My gosh, is there a street you're not tearing up? But, we try to coordinate with each other. A lot of times, our inspector will know, he'll see the guy get out of the truck, and he'll run over to the truck and talk to him, and he'll have some information that we don't know from a different division. So there's constantly a process of trying to collect the information. I don't think anybody's ever come up with really a great system, but I know a lot of people put a lot of effort into trying to.
I had a couple of questions. First of all, thank you. You mentioned related to Eastern Avenue that you're planning on doing some additional outreach there and working on some meetings with residents, which will be great. And I hope that part of that will be what Daryl and I discussed with Councilmember Todd from DC about a community meeting involving DDOT and Washington Gas as well, because it would be helpful to have all of those parties together to talk about and share the information so that everybody understands what's coming up. Related to that, when you come back through on Eastern near Walnut, residents are really concerned about there being a situation like there was before with the steel plates on for 4 months and the unforeseen water that filled the hole and all of the issues that happened there. Do you foresee something like that again, or are you actively taking measures to avoid that so that you anticipate what might happen when you come back the other direction?
We know that when we go back into Walnut, we're going to have a diesel pump on site the first day we open the street up, because the alleyway that runs parallel to Whittier has a underground spring that runs down it, which a couple of the neighbors were good enough to let us know about. There's also some problems that we inherited. That particular roadway there, when they put that Jersey wall up and put that retaining wall up, there's no concrete underneath the ground. So the asphalt is right on the dirt. So as we're trying to dig, the thing's constantly collapsing. It's one of the reasons after they've patched it, and if you look over there today, you'd wonder what kind of blind man patched it, because it's a mess. But it was also one of the things when we were talking to DDOT about getting the permits to start replacing this. DDOT's going to have us go back in and pour concrete sub-bases that didn't exist there when we opened the street up. So that's going to make the condition for the future better. But when we open the other side of the street, we're anticipating a lot of problems in that area. We're just going to we're going to come in better prepared because of what we ran into the last time.
And then the other concern I've heard a lot is crews working past the hours that they have said they will work into rush hour, and people coming home at 6 p.m. and crews are still there. Is there any way you can anticipate the things that that cause those delays? Why is that happening? Is it something we can expect to happen regularly? Can you give a little more information on that? The
crews occasionally, especially if they're ordering concrete, the concrete trucks are very bad for not showing up on time. They'll show up 3, 4, 5 hours late. Sometimes they don't show up at all. Sometimes we'll order them, they'll say they have a 12 o'clock delivery, it shows up at 4 o'clock. If we have a hole open, we try to secure it the best way, and that's put the concrete in the ground. So typically if a crew's out there late, there's a bona fide reason. We normally don't know until about 3 o'clock when the crew calls in and says, the concrete truck's not here, we can't tear down. So we really don't know probably until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We stay on top of our crews to be off the street by the permitted time. So at least 80% of the crews are off the street every day on time.
But Rich, sorry, just to follow up on that, if there are circumstances like that, is it unrealistic to think that you could ping like Daryl and Casey and myself, because I mean, we can get that information out to the listservs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know at 3 o'clock and somebody's coming home at 5 or 6, and you contact one of us, we can put that out on the listservs.
Right.
And people read their listservs all day long, and they'll know coming home the crews are out.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Because I think that, I mean, you know, I've complained, and because I live near there, and when you make that turn and you get stuck, and then you have to go all the way down to Eastern to New Hampshire, and then come all the way back again, and that's, you know, at 6 o'clock at night is a real pain.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and I think that would alleviate, particularly at people coming home during rush hour when that happens.
No, we can definitely put that into the play.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap up because we have to. Oh, sorry.
A couple questions. One, you mentioned that WSSC, they can trench in a shorter period of time. Why
Right.
does it take you guys so long to run your trenches, one? And two, since you guys all use a general contractor to do your work, why don't you guys, all the utilities, get together, hire a general contractor? If you have to have work that's done by Pepco, WSSC, Washington Gas, one contractor just run all the lines at one time.
Okay, first off, the difference in installing conduit, installing gas line, and installing water line are all very uniquely different. The only thing that's similar in gas line and water line is you're only 3 feet deep. The design of the utilities for transmission lines, because of such high voltage, is to get them as low as you can in the ground and get them underneath all of the other services. So one of the reasons we're so slow is if there's a water line crossing, we have to get down under it, sometimes tunneling, but sometimes just having to dig around the existing pipe. So we're down much deeper. So it is a different style of work. I'm a mechanical contractor. Have been for years. So I've done all 3 of those functions. And the functions are uniquely different. When WSSC is putting a water line in, like they were going up Philadelphia, they dig 3 feet deep. They only need a trench about 12 to 15 inches wide. They can literally put the line together on the ground and throw it over in the hole. The conduit, because it has to be at a specific elevation, and it has to be at a specific center line, it has to literally be put in by hand. There's actually an engineering crew out there actually taking shots on the elevations the moment the concrete's being poured. Because when you start taking conduit and you start moving it up and down even at a degree, 1 degree of movement turns into 15 feet of difference 100 feet away. So you start talking about making things that go up and down, you can't get the wire to go through them, then you're talking about more manholes, more cost, and you also have more road, areas tore up. So that's the reason that there's not a single answer to all 3, because they're uniquely different in what they do.
Okay. And I just finally like to say that, you know, this issue about communications is a statewide problem. I chaired a working group at the Maryland Municipal League that brought all the utilities together because everybody is upset and frustrated about you guys not talking to the elected officials who are the best conduit to talk to the constituents. So if you guys, all of you, whether it's Pepco, WSSC, Washington Gas, if you guys can make sure it doesn't matter how small an issue it is, that it is pushed down to the elected officials so that we can decide whether or not it should be given to residents would be extremely helpful.
And we appreciate that. I think one of the things that Pepco and I have talked about on this, and I've worked with Baltimore Gas and Electric, I've worked with Delmarva Power, I've worked with Con Ed, I've worked with Dominion. This problem is not unique to our area. Right. One of the things that I have to give a lot of kudos to Pepco for is they make more of an effort than any of the other utilities I've ever worked with. There's more time being invested by this government affairs team than any group I've ever worked with. We're trying to set up a pattern that will work for the future and improve things. You know, we had another contractor on another phase of this job. It was over in Silver Spring. They were there for a year and a half, tearing up rock going down the street. In a year and a half, they didn't darken the manager's door of the condo. She had people that were checking out and living in motels because they couldn't stand the noise. When I walked in and introduced myself, she was shocked. But part of that is the process that Pepco is trying to build a better system to make this work. That's why these meetings are very helpful to us. The more that's fed back, the better we can work on our end to try to make it work better, both as contractors and as utilities.
In whatever best practices you guys learn, make sure you share that with the other utilities because they can take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Great. All right. I'm going to say thank you to Rich and Tammy for coming this evening. And I think Rich's cards are over on the table if people want to get those, and we will continue the conversation. Thank you.